The bullet grazed Katherine Anderson's shoulder as she dove behind the overturned wagon, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst through her ribcage. And in that moment of terror and pain, she realized nobody in this God-forsaken New Mexico Territory town would even notice if she disappeared forever. It was July 1883, and Katherine had been working as a seamstress in Casa Grande for 3 years, invisible as the dust that coated every surface in the relentless summer heat. The robbery happening at the general store across the dirt street had nothing to do with her, yet here she was, caught in the crossfire like she'd been caught in the crossfire of life itself. Always in the wrong place, always unnoticed, always alone. The shooting stopped as quickly as it started. The outlaws thundered out of town on their horses, leaving chaos in their wake. Katherine pressed her hand against her bleeding shoulder, feeling the warm blood seep between her fingers. She struggled to her feet, dizzy and disoriented. "Miss, you're hurt." A young boy's voice called out, but he ran past her toward the store where the real drama had unfolded. Katherine stumbled down the alley between the general store and the saloon, her vision blurring. She needed to get somewhere safe, somewhere she could tend to her wound. Her small room above the dress shop seemed miles away. Her legs gave out and she collapsed against the wooden wall of a building, sliding down until she sat in the dirt. The world tilted and swayed. She closed her eyes, accepting that this was how it would end. Nobody would miss her. Her parents were dead, killed by influenza when she was 16. She had no siblings, no family, no friends really. Just customers who barely looked at her face when they picked up their mended clothes. She was 22 years old and had never felt like she mattered to a single soul. "Madam. Madam, can you hear me?" The voice was deep, urgent, concerned. Strong hands touched her uninjured shoulder gently. Katherine forced her eyes open. A man knelt before her, his face shadowed by his hat. She could make out a strong jaw, concerned eyes the color of whiskey and firelight, and the beginning of stubble on his chin. "You're bleeding," he said, and his voice held such genuine worry that Katherine almost laughed. A stranger cared more in this moment than anyone had in years. "Just a graze," she managed to whisper, though the pain was intensifying. "We need to get you to Doc Morrison." The man shifted, and she saw he was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in working clothes, dusty from travel. "Can you stand if I help you?" "I don't want to be trouble," Katherine said automatically, the words she'd trained herself to say, making herself smaller, less inconvenient. "Trouble?" The man looked genuinely confused. "Madam, you're hurt. That's not trouble, that's an emergency. Now I'm going to lift you up." "My name's Zachary Armstrong. I own a ranch about 10 miles north of here." "What's your name?" "Katherine Anderson," she said as he carefully slid one arm behind her back and another under her knees. "Well, Miss Anderson, I'm going to take care of you. Hold on to me." He lifted her as if she weighed nothing, and Katherine found herself pressed against his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong beneath his shirt. Nobody had held her in years. The tenderness of it made her throat tight with unexpected emotion. Zachary carried her down the main street, calling out for the doctor. People who had ignored her moments ago now stared. Katherine wanted to disappear, to not be seen like this, vulnerable and bloody and in a stranger's arms. Doc Morrison came running from his office, a short man with white hair and quick hands. "Bring her inside, quickly." The next hour passed in a haze of pain and medical attention. The bullet had indeed only grazed her, but the wound needed cleaning and bandaging. Through it all, Zachary stayed. She could hear him in the other room talking with the doctor, his voice a low rumble of concern. When Doc Morrison finally let him back in, Katherine was sitting up on the examination table, her dress torn and bloody, her arm wrapped in clean white bandages. "She'll be fine," Doc Morrison said. Needs rest and to keep the wound clean. Where are you staying, Miss Anderson? I have a room above the dress shop, Katherine said quietly. Those stairs are too steep for you right now, the doctor said, shaking his head. You need somewhere on ground level at least for a few days. I'll be fine, Katherine insisted, not wanting to impose, not wanting to be a burden. No, Zachary said firmly. You won't be fine climbing stairs with that injury. You're coming to my ranch. Katherine's eyes widened. Sir, I couldn't possibly. I don't even know you. You know my name is Zachary Armstrong. You know I own a ranch. You know I brought you to the doctor instead of leaving you bleeding in an alley. His voice was gentle but resolute. I have a housekeeper, Mrs. Rosales, who lives on the property. She's been wanting someone to fuss over since my mother passed 2 years ago. You'll have your own room, proper food, and space to heal. It's not charity, Miss Anderson. It's basic human decency. But my work, Katherine protested weakly. I have orders to fill. I'll speak with Mrs. Henderson at the dress shop, Doc Morrison offered. She's a reasonable woman. She'll understand. Katherine looked between the two men, both watching her with concern, both acting like her welfare actually mattered. It was so foreign to her that she didn't know how to process it. I don't want to impose, she said again, her default response to any kindness. Zachary pulled up a chair and sat down so they were at eye level. Miss Anderson, answer me honestly. Is there someone in this town who will check on you every day? Someone who will make sure you eat, that your bandages stay clean, that you don't develop a fever? Katherine opened her mouth, then closed it. The truth was too pathetic to speak aloud. That's what I thought, Zachary said, but his tone held no judgment, only sadness. So you're coming with me. At least until you're healed enough to manage on your own. Consider it payment for scaring off those outlaws. You scared them off? Katherine asked. I fired a few shots, Zachary admitted. I was coming into town for supplies when I saw them robbing the store, figured I'd help out. Then you saved people's lives today, Katherine said softly, including mine. And now I'm going to make sure you recover properly. Say yes, Miss Anderson. Let someone help you for once. There was something in his eyes, a knowing that made Katherine wonder if he somehow saw her, really saw her, in a way nobody else ever had. She was so tired of being invisible, so tired of pretending she didn't need anyone. Yes, she whispered. Thank you. A smile broke across Zachary's face, transforming his serious expression into something warm and genuine. Good. I'll go get my wagon ready. Doc, can you make sure she doesn't try to sneak out while I'm gone? I'll guard the door myself, Doc Morrison said with a chuckle. True to his word, Zachary returned within the hour with a wagon fitted with blankets and pillows to make the journey more comfortable. He helped Katherine into the back, insisting she lie down despite her protests that she could sit up front. You've been through trauma, he said firmly. You're going to rest. As the wagon rolled out of Casa Grande, Katherine stared up at the endless blue New Mexico sky, hardly believing this was happening. A stranger was taking her to his ranch, a stranger who seemed to care whether she lived or died. The landscape rolled past, all scrub brush and red earth, mountains rising in the distance. The July heat was oppressive, but there was a canopy over the wagon bed that provided shade. Katherine found herself drifting, lulled by the motion and exhausted from blood loss and shock. She woke when the wagon stopped. Blinking in the late afternoon light, she saw Zachary looking down at her. We're here, he said gently. Welcome to the Armstrong Ranch. He helped her sit up carefully, and Katherine got her first look at what would be her home for the next few days. The ranch house was larger than she'd expected, built of adobe with a wide covered porch. Trees had been planted around it, providing precious shade. Outbuildings dotted the property, and she could see cattle grazing in the distance. It was beautiful in a stark, practical way. An older woman came hurrying out of the house, wiping her hands on her apron. She had silver-streaked black hair, warm brown skin, and sharp dark eyes that missed nothing. "Zachary, what happened?" she called out in Spanish-accented English. "This is Miss Katherine Anderson," Zachary said, carefully lifting Katherine from the wagon. "She was caught in the crossfire during a robbery in town. Doc Morrison patched her up, but she needs a place to recover. I told her you'd been wanting someone to fuss over." Mrs. Rosales's expression immediately shifted to concern. "Ay, pobrecita. Bring her inside quickly. I'll prepare the guest room." The house was cool and welcoming inside, with thick walls that kept out the heat. Zachary carried Katherine through a main living area with comfortable furniture and into a bedroom that smelled of lavender and sunshine. "This was my sister's room before she married and moved to Santa Fe," Zachary explained, settling Katherine gently on the bed. "She'd be happy to know it's being used for something good." Mrs. Rosales bustled in with fresh water and linens. "Out, out," she shooed Zachary. "Let me help her get comfortable. Go see to your horses." Zachary hesitated at the door, looking back at Katherine. "If you need anything at all, just tell Mrs. Rosales." "I mean it, Miss Anderson. You're safe here." After he left, Mrs. Rosales helped Katherine out of her ruined dress and into a clean nightgown that must have belonged to Zachary's sister. The older woman's hands were gentle but efficient as she checked the bandages. "That doctor did good work," she pronounced, "but you need food and rest. When did you last eat?" Katherine had to think about it. "Yesterday evening, I think." Mrs. Rosales made a disapproving sound. "No wonder you're so thin. I'll bring you soup and bread. Then you sleep." True to her word, she returned shortly with a tray bearing a bowl of rich chicken soup, fresh bread, and cool water. Katherine hadn't realized how hungry she was until the smell hit her. She ate slowly, savoring every bite. "You live alone in town?" Mrs. Rosales asked, sitting in a chair by the bed. "I work as a seamstress above the dress shop," Katherine explained. "I have a small room there." "Family, all gone," Katherine said quietly. "It's just me." Something in Mrs. Rosales's expression softened even more. "Well, while you're here, you have us. Zachary is a good man, though too serious sometimes. He needs more people around, but he keeps to himself since his parents died. Both his parents are gone. His father 5 years ago, his mother 2 years ago. Heart problems, both of them. Too much stress running this ranch." Mrs. Rosales shook her head sadly. "Zachary works himself too hard trying to keep everything going. He's 27 now and should be thinking about starting his own family, but he says he doesn't have time." Katherine finished her soup, feeling warmth spread through her body that had nothing to do with the food. She was in a real home, being cared for by people who seemed genuinely kind. It felt like a dream. "Rest now," Mrs. Rosales said, taking the tray. "I'll check on you later." Katherine lay back against the pillows, her shoulder throbbing but manageable. Through the window, she could hear the sounds of the ranch settling into evening. Cattle lowing, horses whinnying, men calling to each other in the distance. It was so different from the lonely silence of her room in town. She must have dozed off because the next thing she knew, the room was darker and someone was knocking softly on the door. "Miss Anderson," Zachary's voice. "May I come in?" "Yes," she called out, struggling to sit up. Zachary entered carrying an oil lamp which he set on the bedside table. He'd cleaned up from the journey, his face freshly washed, his hair damp. "I wanted to check on you before I turn in for the night," he said, pulling up the chair Mrs. Rosales had used. "How are you feeling?" "Better," Katherine said honestly. "Thank you for all this. I still can't quite believe it." "What can't you believe?" "That a stranger would go to all this trouble for me." Zachary was quiet for a moment, studying her face. Mrs. Rosales tells me you have no family. No, Katherine confirmed. Not for 6 years now. I'm sorry. That must be lonely. Katherine almost brushed it off with a polite deflection, but something about the dim lamplight and Zachary's genuine expression made her speak the truth instead. It is. I think I've been lonely for so long I forgot what it feels like to be anything else. I know that feeling, Zachary said quietly. After my parents died, I buried myself in work, told myself the ranch needed me, the cattle needed me, and that was enough. But it's not the same as connecting with people, is it? No, Katherine agreed. Though I'm not sure I ever really learned how. Even before my parents died, I was shy. Quiet. The kind of person people forget is in the room. I don't think anyone could forget you're in a room, Zachary said, and there was something in his voice that made Katherine's breath catch. That's kind of you to say, but not true. I've spent 3 years in Casa Grande, and I doubt most people even know my name. Then they're fools, Zachary said with such conviction that Katherine felt tears prick her eyes. I've known you for a few hours, Miss Anderson, and I can already tell you're someone worth knowing. You brought me here because I was injured, Katherine said, trying to understand. Basic human decency, you said. I brought you here because you were injured, Zachary agreed. But I invited you to stay because when I found you in that alley, you looked so resigned. Like you'd already decided you didn't matter enough for anyone to help, and that broke something in me. Because I know that feeling too, and nobody should have to feel that way. Katherine stared at him, this man who barely knew her, speaking words that touched the deepest wounds in her heart. I whispered to myself once that I'd never feel celebrated. That I wasn't the kind of person who got celebrated, that I was meant to exist quietly in the background and never expect more. When did you whisper that? Zachary asked softly. On my 21st birthday last year. I spent it alone, sewing dresses for other women's parties. I thought about my life, everything I'd lost, everything I'd never had, and I just whispered it to the empty room. Zachary reached out and very gently took her hand, his calloused fingers warm around hers. Then you whispered wrong, Katherine, because I'm going to celebrate you. Every breath you take while you're under my roof, I'm going to make sure you know you matter. Katherine felt a tear slide down her cheek, then another. She couldn't remember the last time she'd cried in front of anyone. Why? Why do you care? Because someone should, Zachary said simply. Because you deserve it. Because I looked in your eyes today and saw something worth caring about. They sat in silence for a moment, his hand still holding hers, the lamplight casting gentle shadows on the walls. I should let you rest, Zachary finally said, releasing her hand carefully. But I meant what I said. While you're here, you matter. Your comfort matters, your healing matters, you matter. Get used to it. He stood and moved toward the door, then paused and looked back. Sleep well, Katherine. It was the first time he'd used her first name without the formality of Miss, and it sent a little flutter through her chest. Good night, Zachary, she said softly. After he left, Katherine lay in the darkness, her mind spinning. Something had shifted today, something fundamental in the trajectory of her life. She'd been saved, yes, but more than that, she'd been seen. Really seen. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt like she existed in full color, instead of as a ghost haunting the edges of other people's lives. The next morning, Katherine woke to sunlight streaming through lace curtains and the smell of coffee and bacon. Her shoulder ached, but it was the manageable ache of healing rather than the sharp pain of fresh injury. She sat up carefully, taking in the room properly for the first time in daylight. It was decorated simply but thoughtfully, with a dresser, a wardrobe, a comfortable chair by the window, and cheerful yellow curtains. Someone had brought in her small bag from the wagon, which must have been in the back when Zachary came to town. She had one spare dress in there, thankfully, though it would be difficult to get into with her injury. A knock on the door was followed by Mrs. Roseales entering with a tray. "Good morning. I heard you moving around. I brought breakfast and some fresh bandages. How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in years," Katherine admitted. "Good, good. Eat first, then I'll help you dress and change those bandages." The breakfast was delicious: eggs and bacon and fresh bread with butter. Katherine ate every bite, surprising herself with her appetite. Mrs. Roseales chatted while Katherine ate, telling stories about the ranch and Zachary's childhood. "He was such a serious boy even then," she said fondly. "Always responsible, always thinking about others. His father worried he didn't play enough, but that's just Zachary's nature. He feels things deeply, that one." After breakfast, Mrs. Roseales helped Katherine wash and dress, carefully working around her injured shoulder. The bandages were changed, and Katherine was relieved to see the wound looked clean, no signs of infection. "You're healing well, Mrs. Roseales pronounced. "Now, would you like to sit on the porch? The morning air is still cool, and I think it would do you good to be outside." Katherine agreed eagerly, already feeling restless from being in bed. Mrs. Roseales helped her to the front porch, where a comfortable rocking chair was positioned to catch the morning breeze. A cat appeared from somewhere and wound itself around Katherine's ankles before jumping into her lap. "That's Mariposa," Mrs. Roseales said. "She usually doesn't take to strangers." Katherine stroked the cat's soft fur, feeling absurdly pleased by this small acceptance. She rocked gently, watching the ranch come to life around her. Cowboys moved between buildings, tending to various tasks. Chickens scratched in a yard near what must be the kitchen building. The whole place hummed with purposeful activity. Then she saw Zachary emerge from the barn, leading a beautiful chestnut horse. He spotted her on the porch and changed direction, leading the horse over. "Good morning," he called out, his face breaking into a smile. "You look better today." "I feel better," Katherine said. "Your home is wonderful." "Our home for now," Zachary corrected gently. "This is Copper. I was about to take him out to check the north pasture fence. Would you like to come? The wagon ride wouldn't be too rough." Katherine hesitated. She didn't want to be in the way of his work. "Please," Zachary added, as if sensing her reluctance. "I'd enjoy the company." So Katherine found herself in the wagon again, this time sitting up front next to Zachary as Copper pulled them along a rough track toward the north pasture. The morning sun was warm but not yet brutal, and a light breeze carried the scent of sage and juniper. "Tell me about your ranch," Katherine said, genuinely curious. Zachary's face lit up as he talked about the land his grandfather had claimed 30 years ago, how his father had built it into a successful cattle operation, how Zachary was working to make it even better. He talked about the challenges of ranching in New Mexico territory, the constant worry about water, the threat of drought, the complexity of getting cattle to market. "It's hard work," he admitted. "Some years I wonder if it's worth it. But then I ride out at dawn and see the land stretching away in every direction, and I know this is where I'm meant to be." "You love it," Katherine observed. "I do. It's in my blood. My father used to say the land owns us as much as we own it." He glanced at her. "What about you? Did you always want to be a seamstress?" "I fell into it by necessity," Katherine said honestly. "After my parents died, I needed work. I'd always been good with a needle, so Mrs. Henderson at the dress shop took me on. It's fine work, quiet work, it suits me." "But is it what you want to do?" No one had ever asked her that. Katherine thought about it, watching the landscape roll past. "I don't know. I've never let myself think about what I want. Wanting things that might not happen seem dangerous." "Why dangerous?" "Because disappointment hurts less if you don't hope for anything better." Zachary was quiet for a moment, guiding Copper around a rocky outcrop. That's a sad way to live, Katherine. It's a safe way to live, she countered. Safe from disappointment, maybe, but also safe from joy, from surprise, from all the good things that come when you let yourself be open to possibilities. Katherine didn't have an answer for that. She'd built her entire adult life around the principle of expecting nothing, needing no one, making herself small and unobtrusive. The idea of changing that was terrifying. They reached the fence line, and Zachary helped her down from the wagon. "Can you sit in the shade there while I check these posts? I'll be within earshot if you need anything." Katherine settled under a scraggly tree, watching Zachary work. He moved with practiced efficiency, checking each fence post, tightening wire, making notes in a small book he pulled from his pocket. She found herself studying him, this man who had crashed into her life so unexpectedly. He was handsome. She could acknowledge that objectively. Tall and strong from physical labor, with sun-weathered skin and those striking amber eyes. But it was more than his appearance that drew her. It was the way he moved through the world with confidence and purpose. The way he'd looked at her yesterday and seen someone worth saving. The way he kept his promises. "Katherine," his voice pulled her from her thoughts. "You're staring. Am I doing something wrong?" She felt her cheeks heat. "No, sorry, I was just thinking." "About what?" He walked over, wiping his hands on his pants. "About how different you are from anyone I've ever met." "Different how?" Katherine struggled to articulate it. "You seem so certain of yourself, so comfortable in your own skin, like you know exactly who you are and what you're doing." Zachary sat down beside her in the shade, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "I appreciate the compliment, but that's not entirely accurate. I doubt myself all the time. Every decision about the ranch, every interaction with the hands, every choice about how to spend money or time, I just don't show it." "Why not?" "Because I'm the boss. If I'm uncertain, everyone else becomes uncertain, so I project confidence even when I'm terrified I'm making the wrong choice." It was such an honest admission that Katherine felt something in her chest loosen. "You hide it well." "So do you," Zachary said. "Hide your pain, I mean. Yesterday when I found you, even bleeding and hurt, you tried to apologize for being trouble. You've been trained to minimize yourself." "It's easier that way." "Easier for who?" Katherine didn't answer. She didn't have a good answer. Zachary shifted slightly so he was facing her more fully. "Can I tell you something? Yesterday, when I walked into that alley and saw you sitting there, resigned to dying alone, something in me recognized something in you. I've been going through the motions of life since my parents died. Working, sleeping, existing, but not really living. And I saw that same quality in your eyes. Like you'd forgotten how to truly live." "Maybe I have," Katherine whispered. "Then maybe we can remember together," Zachary said softly. The moment stretched between them, full of possibility and fear and something Katherine was afraid to name. Then Zachary stood, offering his hand. "Come on. I want to show you something." He helped her up and led her to a rise overlooking the valley. From here, she could see the ranch spread out below, and beyond it, miles and miles of open land under an endless sky. "This is my favorite spot on the property," Zachary said. "When things get overwhelming, I come here and remember how big the world is, how my problems are just small pieces of something much larger." "It's beautiful," Katherine breathed. "It is," he agreed, but when she glanced at him, he was looking at her, not the view. They spent another hour there, talking about everything and nothing. Zachary told her about growing up on the ranch, about his sister who had married a merchant and moved to Santa Fe, about his dreams of expanding the herd and maybe one day breeding horses as well as cattle. Katherine found herself opening up in return, sharing memories of her childhood, her parents, the quiet grief that had become her constant companion. When they returned to the ranch house for lunch, Mrs. Rosales took one look at them and smiled knowingly. Over the next few days, a routine developed. Katherine would wake to breakfast in her room, then spend the morning on the porch or in the garden behind the house that Mrs. Rosales tended. Zachary would find excuses to check on her throughout the day, their conversations growing longer and more personal. In the evenings, after he finished his work, he would join her on the porch and they would talk until the stars came out. Katherine's shoulder healed steadily. The pain diminished, her strength returned, and she found herself helping Mrs. Rosales with small tasks around the house despite the older woman's protests that she should rest. "I'm not used to being idle," Katherine explained, carefully folding laundry with her good arm. "It makes me anxious." "You've been taking care of yourself for too long," Mrs. Rosales observed. "You don't know how to let others care for you." "I'm learning," Katherine said softly, and it was true. Every day, Zachary found small ways to show her she mattered. He brought her wildflowers from the pasture. He made sure her favorite foods appeared at meals. He asked her opinion on ranch matters and listened carefully to her answers, as if her thoughts had value. One evening, about a week after she'd arrived, they were sitting on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Zachary had been quieter than usual, seeming to struggle with something. "Katherine," he finally said, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "How long are you planning to stay?" Katherine's heart sank. She'd been dreading this question, knowing that her welcome, however genuine, couldn't last forever. "I'm well enough to return to town now. My shoulder barely hurts. I should probably go back tomorrow, resume my work." "What if I don't want you to go?" She looked at him sharply. "What?" Zachary turned in his chair to face her fully. "What if I asked you to stay, not as a guest recovering from an injury, but as someone who belongs here?" "I don't understand." "I'm making a mess of this," Zachary muttered, running a hand through his hair. "Let me try again." "Katherine, this past week has been the best week I've had in years. You've brought life back to this house. When I wake up, I look forward to the day because I know I'll see you. When I'm out working, I find myself hurrying back because I want to tell you about something I saw or hear your thoughts on some decision I'm making. You matter to me. You matter so much that the thought of you leaving makes me feel like something vital is being torn away." Katherine's heart was racing. "Zachary, we barely know each other." "Do we? I feel like I've known you much longer than a week. I've told you things I've never told anyone. You've seen parts of me I keep hidden from everyone else. And I think you feel it too, this connection between us." "I do," Katherine admitted, because denying it would be a lie. "But I'm scared. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to let someone in." "Then we'll figure it out together," Zachary said, reaching for her hand. "Stay, Katherine, not in the guest room hiding away like a visitor. Stay as part of this place. Mrs. Rosales needs help with the house, and you could work from here if you still want to do sewing. Or you could do something else entirely. The point is, I want you here. I want to come home to you at the end of each day. I want to show you every corner of this ranch. I want to celebrate you, Katherine, every single day." Tears were streaming down Katherine's face now. "This is crazy. A week ago I was invisible. Nobody in Casa Grande would have noticed if I'd died in that alley. And now you're asking me to stay to matter, to be seen. It's too much, too fast." "I know it's fast," Zachary said gently. "But sometimes you just know. My father told me once that he knew within an hour of meeting my mother that he wanted to marry her. I thought he was exaggerating, being romantic. But now I understand. Some connections are just immediate and undeniable." "What are you saying?" Katherine whispered. "I'm saying that I'm falling in love with you, Katherine Anderson. Maybe I started falling the moment I found you in that alley and you looked at me like you couldn't quite believe someone had stopped to help." Maybe it was when you opened up to me about your loneliness and I recognized my own reflected back. Or maybe it's been 1,000 small moments this week, each one adding up to something undeniable. I love you, and I want you to stay. Katherine couldn't speak. The words she'd never expected to hear in her entire life were hanging in the air between them, real and terrifying and wonderful. You don't have to say it back, Zachary continued quickly. I know it's too soon, but stay anyway. Give us a chance. Let me prove that you deserve to be celebrated. Let me show you every day that you matter. I'm terrified, Katherine finally managed to say. Me too, Zachary admitted. I've been alone with my grief and my work for so long. Opening up to you to this scares me more than anything. But I think being alone forever scares me more. Katherine looked at him, this man who had saved her in more ways than one. She thought about returning to her small room in Casa Grande, to her quiet, invisible life. Then she thought about staying here, where flowers appeared on her breakfast tray and someone asked her opinion, and she felt like she existed in full color. Yes, she said. Yes, I'll stay. Zachary's face transformed with joy. He stood, pulling her gently to her feet, mindful of her healing shoulder. You mean it? I'm terrified and it's crazy and I don't know how to do any of this, but yes, I want to stay, I want to try. He cupped her face in his hands, his touch infinitely gentle. Can I kiss you? Katherine's breath caught. Yes. Zachary leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to change her mind. When his lips met hers, it was soft and sweet and full of promise. Katherine felt something inside her that had been frozen for years begin to thaw. This was what it felt like to be chosen, to be celebrated, to matter to someone. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. I have so many plans, Zachary said, his forehead resting against hers. Things I want to show you, places I want to take you. But first we should probably tell Mrs. Rosales you're staying. She'll be thrilled. Mrs. Rosales was indeed thrilled, hugging Katherine tightly and chattering in rapid Spanish about how she always knew from the first day. She immediately began planning how to rearrange things to give Katherine more permanent space. That night, lying in her bed, Katherine stared at the ceiling and marveled at how drastically her life had changed in just over a week. She was staying on a ranch with a man who said he loved her. A man who saw her, really saw her, and chose to celebrate her existence. It was terrifying. It was wonderful. It was everything she'd thought she'd never have. Over the following weeks, Katherine settled into life on the ranch. She helped Mrs. Rosales with housework, tended the garden, and even started taking on sewing projects from women in town that Mrs. Henderson sent her way. But more than that, she became part of the fabric of the ranch itself. Zachary taught her to ride, patient as she overcame her fear of the large animals. They would ride out together in the mornings before the heat became oppressive, Zachary showing her every corner of his property, sharing his dreams for its future. I want to build a bigger house someday, he told her one morning as they paused to let the horses drink from a stream. Something with more rooms, maybe a library. My mother always wanted a library. That sounds lovely, Katherine said, watching the way sunlight played across his face. Would you want that? Zachary asked, looking at her intently. A bigger house, I mean, more space. I'd want whatever makes you happy, Katherine said honestly. I've spent so long in tiny spaces, anything feels grand to me. But what would make you happy? Zachary pressed. Your dreams matter too, Katherine. It still surprised her when he did this, when he insisted her thoughts and feelings and wants mattered. She was getting better at answering honestly instead of deflecting. I think I'd like a sewing room, she said slowly. Somewhere with good light where I could work. And maybe a porch that wraps around the house so we could sit outside in any weather. And definitely a library, Because I've always loved books but never had money for them." "Then that's what we'll build someday," Zachary said with such certainty that Katherine felt tears prick her eyes. Their relationship deepened as summer progressed into fall. Zachary courted her properly, asking permission before every kiss, respecting her space even as they grew closer. He continued his practice of celebrating her in small ways, a ribbon that matched her eyes appearing in her sewing basket, her favorite meal prepared for Sunday dinner, time carved out of his busy schedule just to sit with her and talk. In turn, Katherine learned how to care for someone else. She mended his work clothes and made him new shirts. She packed him lunches for long days out with the cattle. She listened to his worries about the ranch and offered what comfort she could. She was learning that love was built in these small daily acts as much as in grand declarations. They talked about everything: their childhoods, their losses, their hopes and fears. Zachary told her about the pressure he felt to live up to his father's legacy, the weight of keeping the ranch successful. Katherine talked about the loneliness that had defined her life, the feeling of being perpetually invisible. "You're not invisible anymore," Zachary would remind her whenever she fell into old patterns of self-deprecation. "You're the most visible person in my world." They also talked about the future, carefully at first, then with increasing confidence. Zachary made it clear he wanted to marry her, but he was willing to wait until she felt ready. "I've waited 27 years to find you," he said one evening as they sat on their favorite porch chairs. "I can wait however long you need to be sure." "I'm sure about you," Katherine said softly. "I'm just working on being sure about myself, about deserving this." "You do deserve this," Zachary said for the 100th time. "You deserve everything good in this world." By late October, Katherine finally believed him. Not because he'd worn her down with repetition, but because his actions had proven it true. She mattered here. She was needed, wanted, celebrated. She'd become friends with some of the ranch hands' wives who lived on nearby properties. She had a community, a home, a place in the world. One cool October evening, Zachary asked her to ride out with him to watch the sunset from their favorite overlook. Katherine bundled up in a shawl and they rode out together, comfortable in the companionable silence that came from truly knowing someone. At the overlook, Zachary helped her down from her horse and led her to a spot where he'd spread out a blanket. As the sun began to paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson, he took both her hands in his. "Katherine, these past 3 months have been the happiest of my life. You've changed everything. This ranch that felt like both my passion and my prison has become a home again because you're in it. I wake up excited for each day because I get to spend it with you." Katherine's heart began to race as Zachary dropped to one knee. "I know we haven't been together long by some standards, but I also know with absolute certainty that I want to spend the rest of my life celebrating you. Katherine Anderson, will you marry me?" He pulled a ring from his pocket, a simple gold band with a single deep red stone. "This was my grandmother's," Zachary explained. "My grandfather gave it to her when they married in 1825. She wore it every day until she died. My mother wore it after my grandmother passed, and I'd be honored if you'd wear it now." Katherine looked at the ring, then at Zachary's face, open and vulnerable and full of love. She thought about the woman she'd been just 3 months ago, resigned to invisibility and loneliness. Then she thought about who she was now, celebrated and cherished and seen. "Yes," she said, her voice strong and sure. "Yes, I'll marry you." Zachary's whoop of joy echoed across the valley as he stood and swept her into his arms, spinning her around carefully before setting her down to slide the ring onto her finger. Then he kissed her with a passion that took her breath away. "We'll have a good life," he promised against her lips. "I swear to you, Katherine, I'll spend every day making sure you know how loved you are." "I already know," Katherine said and meant it. They were married 3 weeks later in the small Catholic church in Casa Grande. Mrs. Rosales helped Katherine sew a beautiful dress of cream-colored silk, the finest thing Katherine had ever made. Zachary's sister Rose traveled from Santa Fe with her husband and children. Some of the neighbors attended, and even Mrs. Henderson from the dress shop came, looking surprised but pleased by how Katherine had blossomed. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. Father Miguel performed the service in English and Spanish, blessing their union. When Zachary lifted Katherine's veil and kissed her as his wife, she felt the last pieces of her old, invisible life fall away. She was Katherine Armstrong now, beloved wife of Zachary Armstrong, an essential part of something beautiful. The wedding breakfast was held at the ranch, with tables set up outside and food enough for everyone. The ranch hands congratulated Zachary and welcomed Katherine officially as the boss's wife. The neighboring women promised to visit more often now that Katherine was settled. Rose pulled Katherine aside and hugged her tightly. "I haven't seen my brother this happy since before our parents died," she said, tears in her eyes. "Thank you for bringing him back to life." "He did the same for me," Katherine said honestly. That night, alone for the first time as husband and wife in the main bedroom that Katherine had moved into the week before, Zachary held her close. "Happy?" he asked softly. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Katherine admitted. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is real." "It's real," Zachary assured her, kissing her temple, "and it's forever. You're stuck with me now, Mrs. Armstrong." "Good," Katherine said, snuggling closer, "because I'm not going anywhere." Their wedding night was tender and unhurried, two people learning each other fully for the first time. Zachary was patient and gentle, making sure Katherine felt cherished and safe. When Katherine finally fell asleep in his arms, she felt complete in a way she'd never experienced before. The winter passed in a blur of domesticity and deepening love. Katherine learned more about running a ranch household from Mrs. Rosales, who was delighted to gradually turn over more responsibilities. Zachary taught Katherine about cattle and horses, land management, and business decisions. They made choices together about the ranch's future, true partners in every sense. In the spring, Katherine discovered she was pregnant. She told Zachary one morning at breakfast, nervous about how he'd react. They talked about children in abstract terms but hadn't planned anything so soon. Zachary stared at her for a long moment, then his face broke into the biggest smile she'd ever seen. He jumped up, pulling her into his arms, laughing with pure joy. "We're having a baby?" he asked, pulling back to look at her face. "Yes," Katherine confirmed. "Are you happy?" "Happy." "Katherine, I'm ecstatic. We're going to be parents." He spun her around carefully, then set her down, immediately concerned. "Should I not have done that? Can I hurt the baby?" Katherine laughed, her own joy bubbling up. "I think the baby is fine." Zachary dropped to his knees, pressing his face against her still flat stomach. "Hello in there. This is your father. I already love you more than words can say. And your mother is the most incredible person in the world, so you're very lucky." Katherine ran her fingers through his hair, overwhelmed with emotion. This man, this wonderful man, had given her everything she'd thought she'd never have. Love, home, family. She was going to be a mother. She was celebrated not just by Zachary but by the life they'd built together. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Zachary was attentive to the point of being comical, worrying over every little thing. Mrs. Rosales clucked over Katherine like a mother hen, making sure she ate well and rested. Rose visited from Santa Fe when Katherine was 6 months along, bringing baby clothes and advice. "Boys are easier than girls," Rose said, folding tiny gowns. At least that's what I found with my three. We don't know if it's a boy or a girl, Katherine said, rubbing her swollen belly. Zachary wants a girl, Rose said with a knowing smile. He told me he wants a daughter who looks just like you. He told me he doesn't care as long as the baby is healthy, Katherine countered. He doesn't care, Rose agreed, but he secretly hopes for a girl. I know my brother. In December, as winter settled over the New Mexico territory, Katherine went into labor. It was a long, difficult labor that had Zachary pacing anxiously, while Mrs. Rosales and the midwife tended to Katherine. After nearly 20 hours, as dawn broke over the ranch, Katherine delivered a healthy baby boy. When Mrs. Rosales brought the baby out wrapped in blankets, Zachary cried openly. "A son," he whispered in awe. "We have a son." "You can go see your wife now," Mrs. Rosales said with a smile. "She's asking for you." Zachary found Katherine exhausted but radiant, propped up in their bed. He sat carefully beside her, unable to take his eyes off the baby in her arms. "We have a son," Katherine said softly. "Are you disappointed it's not a girl?" "Disappointed?" "Katherine, I'm thrilled." "He's perfect. You're perfect. This is everything." He touched the baby's tiny hand, watching in wonder as the infant's fingers curled around his. "What should we name him?" They discussed names but never settled on anything definite. Now, looking at their son, Katherine knew exactly what felt right. "James," she said. "James Zachary Armstrong, after your father." Zachary's eyes filled with tears again. "You do that. He was your father, and from everything you've told me, a good man. I'd be honored to name our son after him." Zachary kissed her softly. "Thank you. For him, for everything. You've given me more than I ever dreamed possible." Baby James thrived, a healthy and alert infant who seemed to study everything with serious dark eyes. Zachary was a devoted father, changing diapers and walking the floor with James during fussy nights, completely besotted with his son. Katherine marveled at this new phase of her life. She was a mother now, responsible for this tiny life. Sometimes she'd hold James while he slept and think about how different everything was from just 2 years ago. Then she'd been alone, invisible, resigned to a half-life in the shadows. Now she was surrounded by love, essential to the daily rhythms of the ranch, mother to a beautiful baby boy. "What are you thinking about?" Zachary asked one evening, finding her in the nursery holding sleeping James. "About how much has changed," Katherine said softly. "About how you saved me." "We saved each other," Zachary corrected, coming to stand beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "I was just existing before you. Now I'm living." As James grew from infant to toddler, the ranch continued to prosper. Zachary expanded the herd with Katherine's encouragement and started the horse breeding program he'd always wanted. They built the addition to the house, including Katherine's sewing room with its large windows and the wrap-around porch they'd dreamed about. When James was 2, Katherine became pregnant again. This time she gave birth to a daughter they named Clara Rose, after Zachary's sister and Katherine's mother. Zachary cried just as hard at Clara's birth as he had at James's, completely enchanted by his tiny daughter. "She has your eyes," he said in wonder, holding her for the first time. "And your stubbornness, if that cry is any indication," Katherine said with a tired laugh. The years passed in the steady rhythm of ranch life and family. James grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who followed his father everywhere, learning about cattle and horses. Clara was bright and spirited, with her mother's gentle nature and her father's determination. Katherine sometimes helped with the ranch accounts now, her neat handwriting filling ledgers with numbers and notes. She still sewed, making clothes for the family and taking special orders from women in Casa Grande and the surrounding area. But mostly she was mother, wife, partner in building the life she and Zachary had envisioned together. One evening, when James was 8 and Clara was 6, the family sat on their wrap-around porch watching the sunset. The children were playing some complicated game that involved a lot of running and shouting. Zachary sat with his arm around Katherine, both of them content to watch their children play. "You remember that first evening, right after I asked you to stay?" Zachary asked. "I remember everything about those early days," Katherine said. "Why?" "I was just thinking about what you told me. About whispering that you'd never feel celebrated. And I wanted to know if I kept my promise. Do you feel celebrated, Katherine? Have I managed to show you every day how much you matter?" Katherine turned to look at her husband, this man who had changed her entire world. His face showed the passage of time, lines around his eyes from years of sun, some gray threading through his dark hair, but his eyes still looked at her with the same intensity and love as they had that first day. "You've done more than celebrate me," Katherine said, taking his hand. "You've taught me how to celebrate myself, how to take up space in the world, how to believe I matter, how to love and be loved. Every day I wake up in this house, with you and our children, doing work that matters, I feel celebrated. Not just by you, though you do that every single day in 1,000 ways, but by life itself. I'm part of something beautiful and important, and I know my place in it." "Good," Zachary said, pulling her closer, "because you're the center of everything for me. This ranch, our children, everything we've built, it all radiates out from you. And you're my foundation," Katherine said. "The person who saw me when I was invisible, who reached out when I'd given up, who loved me when I didn't know how to love myself." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink toward the horizon, painting the New Mexico sky in brilliant oranges and purples. James called out something to Clara, and she shrieked with laughter, the sound carrying across the porch. "We made a good life," Zachary said. "We did," Katherine agreed. "We really did." More years passed, bringing new challenges and joys. The ranch continued to grow and prosper under Zachary's steady management and Katherine's careful bookkeeping. James showed an aptitude for working with horses and began training them, developing a reputation for his skill. Clara proved to be a natural with numbers, already helping her mother with accounts at age 12. When James was 16, Katherine became pregnant again, surprising everyone including herself. At 39, she hadn't expected another baby, but she and Zachary welcomed the news with joy. "A surprise blessing," Mrs. Rosales said, now in her 70s but still helping around the house. "The best kind." This time, Katherine gave birth to twin boys, Samuel and Matthew. Zachary was beside himself, pacing the house while Katherine labored, worried about her being older for this pregnancy. But everything went smoothly, and suddenly they had 4 children instead of 2. James and Clara were wonderful with their baby brothers, helping whenever needed. The house that had felt spacious now felt full in the best way, alive with the sounds of family. Katherine sometimes looked around the dinner table, at Zachary at the head with their 4 children surrounding them, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. This loud, chaotic, loving family was hers. She was celebrated not just by Zachary anymore, but by all of them, essential to their daily lives, the heart of their home. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Zachary surprised Katherine with a weekend trip, just the 2 of them. Mrs. Rosales and Rose, who had come to visit, would watch the children. Zachary took Katherine to Santa Fe, where they stayed in a nice hotel and explored the city. On their last evening, they attended a concert at a beautiful church. Afterward, walking through the plaza in the cool November air, Zachary pulled Katherine close. 20 years, he marveled. It feels like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once. I know what you mean, Katherine said. Sometimes I can hardly remember who I was before you. You were someone who deserved better than what life had given you, Zachary said firmly. And I'm glad I got to be the one to show you that. You did more than show me, Katherine said. You changed the entire trajectory of my life. You saved me, Zachary, in every way a person can be saved. And you saved me right back, Zachary said. From loneliness, from just going through the motions, from a half-life of work with no joy. You brought color and warmth and love to every corner of my existence. They stopped in front of a fountain, water splashing softly in the quiet evening. Zachary turned Katherine to face him fully. I want to renew our vows, he said. Right here, right now, just the two of us and God and the stars. Will you marry me again, Katherine Armstrong? Katherine felt tears slide down her cheeks. Yes, always yes. Zachary took both her hands in his. I, Zachary Armstrong, promise to love you, honor you, and celebrate you for all the rest of my days. I promise to see you, really see you, and to make sure you never feel invisible again. I promise to be your partner in all things, your comfort in hard times, your companion in joy. I promise to love our children and the life we've built. And I promise to remind you every single day that you matter, that you're essential, that you're loved. Katherine's voice shook with emotion as she made her own vows. I, Katherine Armstrong, promise to love you with everything I am. I promise to be your partner in building our dreams, your support when times are hard, your celebration when times are good. I promise to honor the man you are, the father you've become, the husband who has loved me so completely. I promise to continue learning how to receive your love, how to believe I deserve it, how to give it back fully. And I promise to spend every day grateful for the life we've made together. They kissed there in the plaza, sealing their renewed commitment. When they pulled apart, both were crying and laughing simultaneously. 20 more years, Zachary asked. 20 more years, and then 20 after that, and then forever, Katherine said. They returned to the ranch the next day to find chaos. The twins had gotten into mischief, climbing where they shouldn't and breaking something important. Clara was exasperated, trying to manage them. James had dealt with a minor crisis with the horses. Mrs. Rosales looked exhausted. But as soon as Katherine and Zachary walked in, order was restored. Katherine swept the twins into her arms, scolding them gently. Zachary listened to James's report on the horses, praising his handling of the situation. The house settled back into its normal rhythms, everyone reassured by the return of its center. That night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Zachary and Katherine sat in their favorite chairs on the porch, wrapped in blankets against the November chill. This is my favorite time of day, Katherine said softly. When the work is done and the children are settled and it's just us. Mine too, Zachary agreed. Though I love the chaos too, the noise and mess and constant needs. It means we're alive, we're living fully. We are, Katherine said. Sometimes I think about that woman you found bleeding in the alley 20 years ago. She seems like a stranger now. I can barely remember what it felt like to believe I didn't matter. You've always mattered, Zachary said. You just needed someone to show you. And you needed someone to bring warmth back to your life, Katherine countered. We found each other at exactly the right moment. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd ridden into town an hour later that day, if I'd missed the robbery entirely? Katherine had thought about this before. I think we would have found each other eventually, maybe not that day, but someday. Some connections are inevitable. I like that idea, Zachary said, that we were always meant to find each other. The years continued to unfold, bringing the normal joys and sorrows of life. Mrs. Rosales passed away peacefully in her sleep at age 82, leaving a hole in the household that took time to heal. They all mourned her, this woman who had been friend and grandmother, an essential part of their family. James married at 23, bringing home a sweet-natured young woman named Emma who fit seamlessly into the family. They built a house on the far end of the ranch property and started their own family. Clara went to a teacher's college in Santa Fe, determined to educate children in the territory. The twins grew from mischievous boys into responsible young men who took over more and more of the ranch work. Zachary's hair turned fully gray and he moved a bit slower, but his love for Katherine never dimmed. If anything, it deepened with each passing year, each shared experience, each challenge overcome together. He still found ways to celebrate her, bringing her coffee in bed when his knees allowed him to climb the stairs, leaving notes in her sewing basket, telling her daily that she was beautiful, essential, loved. Katherine's hair silvered too, and lines marked her face, each one earned through years of laughter and worry and joy. She had become the matriarch of a growing family, grandmother to James's children, advisor to Clara in her teaching career, manager of a household that ran smoothly because of her steady presence. On Katherine's 60th birthday, Zachary organized a party that brought together family and friends from all over the territory. Rose came from Santa Fe with her children and grandchildren. Neighbors arrived from surrounding ranches. Former ranch hands who had moved on returned to pay their respects. Even Mrs. Henderson from the dress shop, now quite elderly herself, made the journey. As Katherine looked around at the crowd gathered to celebrate her, she was overwhelmed. All these people, here because of her. Because she mattered to them, because she'd touched their lives in some way. Zachary stood to make a toast, his voice still strong despite his years. My wife Katherine is the center of everything good in my life. 40 years ago, I found her bleeding in an alley, resigned to being forgotten. And I told her I would celebrate her every breath. I've tried to keep that promise every single day since. Katherine, you are the love of my life, the mother of my children, my partner in all things. You deserve this celebration and so much more. Happy birthday, my love. Everyone cheered and clinked glasses. Katherine stood, tears streaming down her face. Thank you all for coming, she said, her voice wavering with emotion. I'm not good at being the center of attention. For most of my early life, I tried to be invisible. But this man, my husband, taught me that I deserved to be seen. He celebrated me when I couldn't celebrate myself. And through his love, I learned to believe I mattered. Now I stand before all of you, surrounded by family and friends, living a life I couldn't have imagined in my wildest dreams. Thank you, Zachary, for saving me. Thank you all for making me part of your lives. I'm celebrated and I finally, fully believe I deserve it. The party lasted long into the evening. Music played, children ran and played, adults shared stories and laughter. As the sun set, Zachary found Katherine standing a bit apart watching it all. Overwhelmed, he asked, sliding his arm around her waist. Grateful, Katherine corrected. So grateful I can hardly find words for it. We built a good life, Zachary said, echoing words he'd spoken decades ago. We did, Katherine agreed. We really, truly did. They stood together watching their family, their friends, their community celebrate. The ranch spread around them, prosperous and thriving. Their children were happy and settled. Grandchildren ran and played. This was legacy, Katherine thought. This was what it meant to matter. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Katherine leaned into Zachary's embrace. They'd grown old together, built a life together, created something beautiful and lasting. She thought about that young woman bleeding in an alley, convinced she'd never matter to anyone. And she thought about the young rancher who had stopped, had seen her, had chosen to celebrate her existence. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," Zachary said. "Every breath, Katherine. I celebrate every breath you take." They returned to the party hand in hand, ready to celebrate well into the night, because this was what they did, who they were. Two people who had found each other when they both needed saving, who had built a life of love and purpose and joy. Two people who had learned together what it meant to truly see and be seen, to love and be loved, to matter and make others matter. The ranch would continue for generations, passed down through James and his children. Clara would establish a school that educated hundreds of children over the decades. The twins would become respected horsemen, known throughout the territory. And always, at the center of the family story, would be Zachary and Katherine, the rancher who had saved a woman and the woman who had saved him right back. Years later, when Zachary was 73 and Katherine was 70, they sat on their porch on a cool spring evening. Their bodies were old now, creaky and slow, but their love remained strong. They held hands, watching the sunset paint the New Mexico sky in shades they'd watched together thousands of times. "You remember what you told me that first night?" Zachary asked. "About whispering that you'd never feel celebrated." "I remember," Katherine said softly. "I think I kept my promise," Zachary said. "I celebrated you, every day, every breath, for 50 years. You did more than celebrate me," Katherine said, turning to look at him. "You showed me how to celebrate myself, how to believe I deserved joy and love and a place in the world. You gave me everything, Zachary. Family, home, purpose, love. You gave me a life I couldn't have imagined. And you gave me the same," Zachary said. "You brought warmth and love back to this house, to my heart. You made everything better just by being in it." They sat in peaceful silence as darkness fell and stars emerged. Somewhere inside, their family was gathering for dinner. Soon someone would call them in. But for this moment, it was just the two of them, an old rancher and the seamstress he'd fallen in love with, celebrating each other one more time. 50 years, Katherine marveled. Half a century together. "And I'd do it all again," Zachary said. "Every moment, every challenge, every joy. I'd choose you every single time." "Me too," Katherine said. "Always you." Inside, they heard Clara calling them to dinner. Their children and grandchildren were gathered, a whole house full of family. Zachary stood carefully, offering his hand to help Katherine up. "Ready?" he asked. "Always," Katherine said, taking his hand. They walked inside together to the warmth and noise and love of their family, this beautiful life they'd built together. Katherine Armstrong, once invisible and alone, now celebrated and cherished and essential. Zachary Armstrong, once isolated by grief and duty, now surrounded by love and warmth and purpose. They had saved each other in that alley 50 years ago, and they continued to save each other every day since. This was their legacy, a love that had transformed two broken people into something whole, something beautiful, something eternal. A rancher who had promised to celebrate every breath, and a woman who had learned she deserved celebrating. Their story would be told for generations in the family. How great-grandfather Zachary had found great-grandmother Katherine bleeding in an alley and brought her home. How he'd loved her so completely that she'd blossomed from invisible to essential. How they'd built this ranch and this family through decades of devotion. But for Zachary and Katherine, the story was simpler. They had found each other, chosen each other, celebrated each other. Every day, every breath for a lifetime, and that was everything.